From ABC News. This week with David Brinkley. Now, from our Washington headquarters, substituting for David Brinkley, here's Sam Donaldson.
President Bush wants Robert Gates to head the Central Intelligence Agency. But his confirmation hearing before the Senate, which begins this week, may produce fireworks. Once before, Gates was nominated to head the CIA, but had to withdraw because of suspicions that he knew far more about the Iran-Contra affair than he admitted. Now, the same issue is there to haunt him. In addition, senators will be asking, now with communism dead, why do we need a CIA director so steeped in the Cold War? And for that matter, should the CIA itself be restructured? We'll ask today's guest, Brent Scowcroft, Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs. Senator David Boren, Chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, which opens its hearing on the Gates nomination tomorrow. And Vincent Canestraro, former Director of Intelligence Programs for the National Security Council and a former high official of the CIA. We'll have a background report on all this from our man, Jack Smith. And our discussion here with George Will, Cokie Roberts, and Harding Carter, all on our Sunday program. First, some news. The Mideast hostage roller coaster is running at full speed this weekend. First, hope that a Western hostage would be released by sometime today. Now, word that that won't happen, but very likely a release within 48 hours, or maybe sometime later. The maneuvering is part of a tit-for-tat process involving Israeli-held Arab prisoners. With us this morning from Tel Aviv is Israel's Defense Minister, Moshe Ahrens. Mr. Minister, thanks for coming in today.
Nice to be with you.
What can you tell us about when you think more Western hostages, another one or two, might be released?
I'm afraid I really can't give you any more news. Our hopes are all riding on the efforts that are being made by the UN Secretary General, who's just left Tehran, and I understand that he is hopeful that he will be able to move things along, and so are we.
Some of the hostage holders are still demanding that you now release Sheikh Obaid, that he be in the next batch of Arab prisoners that you release. Will you do that?
No, we won't do that, and I don't think that would make any sense for us to do that as far as anybody's concerned. That, I think, is probably the best card that we in the West have. The Western countries that are worried about their hostages, we in Israel are concerned about our soldiers held as prisoners and are missing in action. And I think if we give up that card, that may be the end of the release of hostages.
Now, you had another Israeli soldier killed in what? In a fight with a guerrilla? Tell us the details about that.
Well, there's been an upsurge in PLO terrorist activity these last few days. In southern Lebanon, some UN soldiers were killed by Palestinian terrorists who tried to penetrate into Israel. And last night, two Palestinian terrorists fired on an Israeli vehicle in Samaria and killed an Israeli soldier. I think this is a deliberate attempt to try to torpedo the peace process. They know that Baker's coming, and I think they would like to stop it.
Mr. Minister, as you know, President Bush is quite upset that your government is opposing him when he asks for a delay in the loan guarantee question. Why are you going head-to-head with the President of the United States before the U.S. Congress on this?
We are not going head-to-head either with the President or with the Congress. We have put before the government of the United States our request for guarantees for loans that we have to take out in order to help settle the hundreds of thousands of Soviet Jewish refugees that are coming to Israel. If the government of the United States decides that it cannot or will not provide these guarantees, then we will simply have to pay the higher interest on these loans that go without having that guarantee.
As you know, though, it's gotten quite bitter. An Israeli cabinet minister without portfolio, Revahim Ze'evi, has said of President Bush, he is a liar and an anti-Semite. Does that in any way reflect any sort of major opinion within the Israeli government?
That does not reflect major opinion in the Israeli government, or for that matter, in Israel itself. Minister Ze'evi is a member of the cabinet, but he represents a faction in the Knesset that has two members. So it is really a tiny faction in Israeli society and not at all representative of the broad consensus of opinion that values the U.S.-Israeli relationship and has a great deal of respect for the President of the United States.
Well, do you, sir, specifically repudiate that kind of thinking?
I certainly do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahrens, for being with us today. Thank you. Come again. The crew of the Space Shuttle Discovery has performed the major task of their mission, and everything is going well. They deployed a satellite designed to study holes in the Earth's ozone layer, a layer that helps protect life on Earth from the sun's ultraviolet radiation. Discovery itself is due back from orbit on Wednesday. Atlantic City played host in its usual fashion last night to the crowning of a new Miss America. The winner, Miss Hawaii, Carolyn Suzanne Staff. The first time Hawaii has won. She's 24 and wowed the judges by singing a rousing rendition of Ain't Misbehavin'. We'll be back with the rest of today's program in a moment. A servant like Robert Gates, who by almost all accounts is a highly intelligent, highly competent, and industrious expert on intelligent matters, is so controversial when he's nominated to head the government agency about which he knows the most. It is because of the continuing fallout from the Reagan administration's Iran-Contra affair and the continuing dispute between those who see that affair as a great crime against constitutional government and those who dismiss it as a patriotic effort gone sour or, at worst, a trivial matter. For Robert Gates, the questioning of his role in Iran-Contra comes at a time when people are also questioning the role of the CIA in a seemingly less threatening world. Jack Smith takes a look at the issues that surround Gates' confirmation hearing before the Senate. Jack?
Sam, a U.S. Secretary of State this week, hobnobbing with the head of the Soviet secret police. Nothing better symbolizes the astonishing changes taking place in world affairs.
Than the fact that the Secretary of State of the United States is meeting with the head of the KGB in KGB headquarters.
At a time when such things are possible, does the U.S. need a CIA anymore? And specifically, does it need one headed by an old Cold Warrior like Robert Gates, the president's choice for Director of Central Intelligence?
I wouldn't concede that this nomination is in any trouble at all.
The president this week stepped up his campaign for Gates' confirmation as questions continued circulating about the nominee's involvement in the Iran-Contra affair.
You, Robert M. Gates, solemnly swear.
Gates has consistently denied he knew about the scandal. Nevertheless, when he was first nominated as CIA director 4 years ago, Congress was so suspicious he withdrew his name. And this time, new evidence developed by independent prosecutor Lawrence Walsh and implicating the CIA in the cover-up has caused Gates' story to be questioned anew. A week ago, Claire George, Gates' former subordinate at the CIA, was indicted on charges of lying to Congress about the scandal. Since Gates' superior, late CIA Director William Casey, has also been implicated, how could Gates have been in the dark? Former CIA officers say it's quite plausible.
In fact, it would have surprised me the other way around if Casey, who ran Iran-Contra out of his hip pocket, keeping the agency institutionally cut out of it, didn't take great pains to keep his deputy out of it.
Nevertheless, Gates' critics on Capitol Hill remain extremely skeptical.
It's very hard for me to comprehend how he doesn't know or didn't know what was going on.
ABC's Nightline has also reported that U.S. arms technology was transferred to Iraq in the 1980s, and a number of its sources claimed that Robert Gates and the CIA were involved. The White House and the CIA categorically deny it. Gates' confirmation hearings, which were delayed for 2 months, begin here tomorrow, and the controversy surrounding them couldn't come at a worse time. A time when the role, even the existence of the U.S. intelligence agencies is being called into question as obsolete. The CIA was created after World War II to counter a Soviet threat that is visibly disappearing. Just this week, Moscow agreed to stop propping up Cuba's Fidel Castro and to stop sending arms into Afghanistan. In their desperation for Western aid, Soviet leaders are scrambling to liquidate the old sources of East-West friction that justify the $30 billion a year the U.S. spends on intelligence. Not only for the CIA, but also the National Security Agency, which eavesdrops on Soviet leaders, the Defense Intelligence Agency, which forecasts their battle plans, and the National Reconnaissance Office, which builds and launches satellites over their secret installations. Why, say critics, do we need this anymore? Especially when the CIA's record is so spotty, from the Bay of Pigs fiasco in the Kennedy administration until today, when the agency failed to anticipate the collapse of communism. The most radical plan to date has come from New York Democratic Senator Pat Moynihan, who suggests disbanding the CIA and turning its functions over to the State Department.
Because the Cold War is over. And the reflexive response, anywhere they move, we make a counter move. We are fighting with a great empire that claims to own the future. That's over.
Most people, though, disagree and say while the U.S. may spend less on intelligence in the future and use more analysts than spies, it still needs intelligence.
In a fluid, changing world, particularly one in which you curtail your defense capabilities, intelligence is a form of insurance, a very essential form of insurance.
The Bush administration has twice sent U.S. troops into combat, first in Panama, most recently in Kuwait and Iraq during the Gulf War, and in both, intelligence was vital. The fact is, the world is still a very dangerous place. Not only are there 27,000 nuclear warheads in the Soviet Union, but there will be more and more small brushfire wars, like the one in Yugoslavia today. There is the specter of nuclear proliferation, and there is drug trafficking and state terrorism, and all demand intelligence.
We'll want to know precisely what's going on so that we can take action to affect it and not just accept the assurances of the country involved, oh, everything's fine here. Those are all jobs that intelligence will have to do.
America disbanded its intelligence agencies after each of the world wars, and both times found it had to have them back. Intelligence now may be leaner and focus on other things, but most think we still need it, whether or not Robert Gates is confirmed as Director of Central Intelligence. Sam?
Thank you, Jack. Coming next, Vincent Canestraro, a former official at the National Security Council and the Central Intelligence Agency. And shortly, Senator David Boren, chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And Brent Scowcroft, assistant to the president for National Security Affairs.
At GE, we just had an idea that could help eliminate police.
To almost all of the professionals in the intelligence community. He is a brilliant analyst, he's a very innovative mind, and he's very receptive to new ways of doing business.
Is there a however coming? Or?
Well, I think so, and I think the however has to do with the Alan Fires testimony and the reinvigoration of the Iran-Contra investigation, because that cast a pall over the nomination. And because there are such fundamental changes that are going to have to take place in the intelligence community, Bob Gates is going to have to exercise a very strong hand to enforce those changes. And he can't be wounded by Iran-Contra in order to do a good job.
As seems usual in Washington, the question is, what did he know and when did he know it? And a subsidiary question, if he didn't, should he have known it? Let's deal with the first part first. You knew the CIA as run by William Casey.
Yes, I did.
And it had its own institutional culture deriving from his leadership. Is it plausible, possible, you picked the term, that Mr. Gates did indeed not know and should not have known, given his responsibilities about Iran-Contra?
I was Alan Fires' predecessor, and I reported to the chief of the Latin America Division, to the deputy director of operations, and to Bill Casey directly, not to Bob Gates' predecessor, who was John McMahon. That's the way Bill Casey wanted it. Structurally, he wanted his deputy out of the operational chain of command. So yes, it is very plausible.
Now, deal with the other question, the question of moral imperative to know. Should Mr. Gates have known?
That's a different question, and it goes to the integrity or character problem. Did he know that his boss may have been doing things that were outside the institutional framework of the CIA, but possibly using people within the CIA to accomplish? I can't answer that question. I think the hearings this week will certainly clear up a lot of that.
But the first answer you gave was that given, I guess, the compartmentalizing of information and access and memos and all the rest,
sure,
it's perfectly plausible that Mr. Gates knew nothing and would have taken some kind of, if not heroic, exceptional effort to know something.
Well, I think it would have taken a heroic effort to have divined the full extent of the involvement of some CIA people in Bill Casey's operation or his sponsorship of an Ollie North operation. The fact that some people were aware, as I was aware, that Ollie North was sponsoring an arms network in Central America, I think that was pretty much understood by most of the intelligence community professionals at the time. But I don't think that's the real question. The real question is whether the institution itself was directly involved and whether Bob Gates knew it.
Well, you seem to be implying that he chose not to know. Is that what you're saying? Is that and that does get to this question of character and integrity?
Well, it's a perception problem. When I refer to the cloud over his head of Iran-Contra, it's a perception that he probably should have made a greater effort to find out what was going on. I can't answer that question, but it was clear that Bill Casey was sponsoring his own private operations, and perhaps some officials did not choose to question Bill Casey too closely because of the question of loyalty.
But given what you now know, and given what you know about Robert Gates, do you think that he has the character and integrity to be the director now of the Central Intelligence Agency?
I think the answer depends on whether or not he chose deliberately to avoid confronting the suspicion that Bill Casey was doing things that perhaps were illegal. I don't know the answer to that question.
Mr. Canestraro, Gates aside, just very briefly, you believe the agency itself should be restructured. The times have changed, but the agency hasn't.
I think it's fundamental that the intelligence community, and particularly the Central Intelligence Agency, is restructured. The Cold War, which conditioned so much of CIA's operations, has gone. The National Security Act of 1947 set up a community that was responsive to the environment at that time. That environment has shifted. The ground has gone from under the assumptions that we all had. And there are new challenges for the 21st century, and we need to face those challenges. It's a question that CIA, as presently structured as a Cold War institution, is flexible enough to change to meet these challenges.
Should congressional oversight be stiffer? Or should the CIA, as it has in the past, continue to keep secrets, even from Congress?
Well, I think congressional oversight has been very good. I think Dave Boren has instituted a process that is very closely monitoring
Does Senator
CIA's...
Boren know everything at the moment, in your opinion, about all the black bag jobs or secret jobs that the agency may be doing?
I'm sure he knows a lot more than I do.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Canestraro, for being with us. Coming next, Senator David Boren, chairman of the Intelligence Committee, which will recommend approval or rejection of the nomination of Robert Gates. And shortly, the president's advisor on national security affairs, General Brent Scowcroft.
Risk.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Well, now, you've looked over the material your staff has prepared for tomorrow's hearing. Begins tomorrow in nomination of Robert Gates. Is there anything there that, in your view, will cause the Senate to reject it?
Well, I think it's hard to say. I think we really have to wait to hear Mr. Gates himself. We have to hear the other witnesses. So I'm going to withhold judgment. I think most of the members of the committee will. Until we've heard the witnesses themselves, until we've looked at the evidence, there are a lot of tough questions that are there to be asked. I intend to ask those questions, some of them myself, and I'm going to be listening very carefully to the answers.
Well, now, you used to be, or maybe still are, a very strong backer of Robert Gates. And then the Allen Fires business came up, and I think it gave you some pause. Do you think now that that would disqualify Gates from being confirmed what he knew, if anything, about the Iran-Contra affair?
Well, Sam, our responsibility is to be both fair and thorough.
Well, I can see that.
That's exactly what we're going to try to do. So I think obviously the Fire's pleased, and what has been done by the special counsel in the last few days raised some questions.
Yeah, but on a scale of 1 to 10, how serious is it?
Well, I think it's certainly serious, and it needs to be answered, and we'll put those questions to Mr. Gates and ask him to answer it. On the other hand, we're dealing with a person who has 25 years of experience in the government, who has some very, very strong parts to his public service as well, and we're going to treat him fairly. We're not going to go in there and rush to a negative judgment about him. We're going to ask the tough questions, we're going to listen to his answers, and then we're going to make a judgment.
At this stage, in understanding this is the beginning of the process, what do you say to those who say that Gates's problem is that he's in a lose-lose situation? Either he knew and has been deceptive, or he didn't know and was slothful.
Well, I don't think that you can necessarily say it's one or the other. And we're going to hear witnesses, for example, that are going to testify about the way that Mr. Casey ran the agency. Some have said it's impossible Mr. Gates didn't know. Others have said, as you just heard your first guest say, that Casey ran the agency in a way that he might deliberately cut out his deputy, that he didn't want his deputy to be into the loop. And if that's really true, it might be very difficult sometimes for a deputy to know it. We simply don't know the answer to that question, and that's why we're going to have the hearing process. We've had all of the members of the committee involved in this. All 15 have had their staff members form a committee to prepare the questions, to decide which witnesses to call. So I hope that this is going to be one of the most thorough, processes that we've ever gone through in the United States Congress. We have to realize this job does not belong to me, it doesn't belong to Bob Gates, or even to the President. The directorship of Central Intelligence belongs to the American people, and the person we put in that job right now is going to preside over the most sweeping changes in the history of the intelligence community. So it's always a sensitive job. It's very important that we put the right person in that position now.
Are you worried, and how can you judge whether to be worried, about putting a man in there who is now, I guess the term is a subject, not a target, which is more serious, but a subject of the ongoing investigation by the fourth branch of government, the Walsh investigation?
Well, George, we're put into this position. We have an ongoing investigation. We know that. I've met with Judge Walsh. He tells me the rules of the federal grand jury make it impossible for him to share information about the testimony with me. That means we really can't know what he knows at this point. We have to have our own investigation, get the best evidence, the best information we can possibly gather, and then make a decision on that basis. He's also told me that his investigation under the law could run for as long as another 5 years. Now, we certainly couldn't meet our responsibility and give the President's nomination fair consideration if we were to make some kind of an indefinite postponement. So we're simply put in the position of having to make the best judgment that we can make under the facts that are now presented to us, and that's exactly what we're going to try to do.
But, Senator, you know that your colleagues do not want to be in the position of confirming someone only to see him indicted. This would make you all seem foolish, and you don't want to be in that position. So have you in any way indicated to the White House that it might be wiser to send up another name, to not put the Senate in that position?
No, Cokie, I think that's a decision that the President has to make. He obviously supports Mr. Gates very strongly. He's told me that. He's told the American public that. He's worked closely with this man in the National Security Council and at the CIA. He has a very high regard for him. You know, we're kind of in the situation we're often in Washington, that a person with experience is almost disqualified from the position because he or she has been part of an agency of government that's controversial for a long time. So anyone who's been at the CIA over the past decade, let us say, has been there during a period of time of great controversy. And I think for us to rule someone out simply because they were a part of the intelligence community during this time would deny us that experience.
Isn't there a difference between controversy and illegality, one? And two, would it be so terrible to bring in somebody from the outside given that situation?
Well, I think, we're talking about the most sweeping changes in the intelligence community in years and years and years and decades. We're talking about redefining the whole mission of intelligence, as we've heard in your introductory piece. We're not going to need a CIA like we've needed in the past. We're still going to need intelligence, very different kind of intelligence. Do you want someone with no background in the intelligence field making those kinds of judgments? I don't think so. So I think, one of the things we sometimes lose sight of in Washington is we're dealing with individual human beings. We're not dealing just with pawns in a political chess game. We're dealing with real people who have professional careers, who have capabilities. And my determination is this. Mr. Gates has a distinguished professional record. I think he deserves his day before the committee. I think he deserves consideration on a fair basis. He's going to get exactly that, but he's also going to get some very tough questioning. And I and others are not going to vote on this nomination until we've been satisfied with those answers.
Are you satisfied, aside from him, with the intelligence you've been getting? We've just had a war where everyone complained that the intelligence wasn't good enough, and the excuse was, well, that's not the area of expertise the Soviet Union is, and then a coup that nobody anticipated in the Soviet Union. I mean, is the past such wonderful prologue for the CIA?
No, certainly not, Cokie. And as you know, I've been one of the severe critics in trying to get some changes made in the intelligence community. I've said for a long time, we've put too much emphasis just on technology. We haven't had good enough human intelligence. Clearly, when you have the intelligence community saying 6 months before the invasion of Kuwait that Saddam Hussein is no threat to his neighbors, that should be a sign to us that we need more emphasis on human intelligence. And our committee's been pushing that. And in the new world, when we have fewer and fewer troops out around the rest of the world in forward positions, we're going to need even earlier warnings about intentions of possible adversaries. That means better human intelligence. So there must be changes, and those are some of the important decisions that the next director of Central Intelligence will have to make.
Mr. Gates has two characteristics. One is he's a pessimist. He's quoted as saying, when I smell flowers, I ask if there's a funeral. Second, he's a specialist in what used to be the Soviet Union, now Russia. Is that central? Do we need a pessimist focused on the Russian landmass? Is that still the center of our concern?
No, obviously not. We have a Central Intelligence Agency that has half of its assets, very expensive assets, mainly directed at the Soviet military target. That in itself proves that we're going to have to redesign the whole intelligence community. Hopefully we can spend less money on it because those are some of our most costly technologies. We have to reshape it and redesign it in new directions. Economic competition, as much or more than military competition, is going to determine where we go in the next world, so the next century. So I think that, what we need from the next director is both vision and determination. The vision to see a new mission for intelligence and the determination to knock bureaucratic heads together to change the priorities. That's going to be hard to do, and I think that's what we're going to be asking Mr. Gates. We're going to look not only at his past, we're going to look at the future. Lincoln said, sometimes you have to think anew and act anew. We're going to see whether or not in these hearings Mr. Gates has the qualities that will enable him to do just that.
And I take it you're also going to see whether he was truthful or not, because a moment ago you talked about not tarring someone because they were associated with a controversial agency. But in Robert Gates' case, as I understand it, one of your central issues is he raised his hand, he took an oath under the threat of perjury, and he testified essentially that he didn't know much more about the Iran-Contra affair than he read in the newspapers. Is it important to get to the bottom of that? And if, in fact, he didn't tell the whole truth, is that enough to disqualify him?
Oh, Sam, if it's found that he didn't tell the truth, that would disqualify him.
Well, the whole
quite
truth.
clear.
You can split hairs.
I think the whole truth. I think we're going to be interested in judging not only the letter of what he says, but the spirit of what he says, whether he's really being candid and open with us or not. And we're going to probe that. It's very important that we have answers to those questions because the Director of Central Intelligence operates very often in secret. The American people cannot know everything he does. We try to know in the Oversight Committee. Even we have problems sometimes. Therefore, we have to have a process that assures us that we can count on his integrity. So when I say I think it's wrong to prejudge, I think it's wrong to tar someone broadly with a brush because of association, all I'm saying is we have to be fair. I'm not saying that we should shirk our responsibility and not be thorough because that's what we're going to do.
Thank you very much, Senator Bourne. Thanks for coming in today. Coming next, Brent Scowcroft, the President's Assistant for National Security Affairs, CIA, by President Reagan. He withdrew himself from that consideration because of the controversy over the Iran-Contra affair and his possible role in it. What did he know? It's still there, but President Bush nominated again. And my question to you is, why not let sleeping dogs lie? Why revive it again by nominating this man?
Well, because I think the circumstances in '87, the emotional circumstances were very different from what they are now, and I think that was part of the reason that Mr. Gates withdrew his nomination. I think the real reason for renewing it now is that I think Bob Gates is uniquely suited for that important job at this particular time. He is a professional. He has risen fast because of his professional abilities as an intelligence officer. He also now has been intimately involved in the other side of it as a receiver of intelligence. And so he's uniquely qualified, I think, to go back to CIA and say, look, you guys aren't doing it right. This is what the president needs to know, not this. He has a broad perspective that I think is unusual and perhaps almost unique for directors of Central Intelligence.
But he renews the controversy, which continues in this town, about the seriousness or lack of seriousness of charges in the Iran-Contra affair. The question I want to ask you now is, assuming Robert Gates was not part of the diversion of funds, etc., if he lied about his knowledge of it, in your opinion, is that enough to cause him to be rejected by the Senate?
Oh, of course, if he lied about it. But Mr. Gates is a very intelligent individual. If there was something out there that he knew could come up, he certainly would not put himself in this position again.
You're obviously confident because of the faith you have in his integrity and veracity. Does that also, however, presuppose certain conclusions about the internal organization and culture of the CIA as run by William Casey? That it is plausible to believe that there was a lot of compartmentalizing that would even cut out a man of the seniority and importance of Mr. Gates?
I think it is plausible. It's plausible. First of all, in no agency does a deputy always know everything that his boss does. Different agencies run different ways. That is particularly true in the chain of command of the Central Intelligence Agency, even aside from Mr. Casey. Mr. Casey doubled that kind of thing. And in addition, in the CIA, unlike other agencies, you're looked at with
suspicion by trying to probe outside your compartmentalization. So there is a strong culture which makes this whole thing not only plausible, but I think almost inevitable.
But General, it wasn't just the person above Mr. Gates, it was people below Mr. Gates who reported to Mr. Gates on a variety of other things. I mean, every parent knows the situation of not wanting to know everything that's going on in their child's life. Is there some of that element here of Mr. Gates not wanting to know?
At this point, I have no reason to think so. I have no reason to think so. There so far is no one under Mr. Gates and so on who has said that, yes, he told Mr. Gates, or that he had any reason to know. And I think that that is a very, very understandable situation.
General, there's talk all over this town that if this confirmation should run into difficulty, that the president is thinking about naming you to head the CIA and putting Robert Gates in your job, thereby showing that he continues to support him. Is there any truth to that, and would you take the job?
I'm confident that Mr. Gates will be confirmed.
Would you take the job?
I'm confident Mr. Gates will be confirmed.
Cookie, I think he's ducking your question.
Sam, why would you? Why would you say that?
Cookie's onto something. No way.
I'd like to change the subject for just a minute. I'd like to ask you 3 questions that I hope can be answered very quickly on the Middle East. Do Jews have a right to live in East Jerusalem? And if so, why not on the West Bank?
I don't want to talk about rights and wrongs and so on. I think, that East Jerusalem, that is beyond what's called the Green Line, beyond the 60-70, is a territory, the disposition of which should be decided in a peace conference. And I think that things which prejudice that, make a peace conference less likely, and are not helpful to the
Under international law, is it not the case that Israel is today the legitimate sovereign of lands occupied in a defensive war?
I don't know about sovereign, but certainly the de facto managing.
Well, since the world community, certainly, in fact, only 2 nations disagreed, the world community never acknowledged Jordan's annexation of the West Bank. Who is sovereign there?
Well, that's a good question. Hopefully.
An open question.
Hopefully a peace process will resolve that to the acceptance, if not the satisfaction, of the parties in the area.
Well, your position,
that's what we're working on.
Yes, your position is then that it's an open question. Are you not precluding or prejudging the answer to that question when you say that the Israelis do not have a right to sprinkle a few more settlements there?
No, I don't think what we're trying to do is keep it from being prejudged in the advance.
A few more settlements will prejudge that? I mean, we're talking about a tiny number of people.
Well, I think that issue should be solved at a peace conference, not prior to it by actions on either side.
General, is it fair to say the president is angry that in the face of his request to delay the loan guarantees, the Israeli government is defying him by, in effect, saying to the United States Congress, do what we say, not what the President of the United States says?
No, it's not fair to say the President is angry.
Well,
he is not angry.
He's pleased about it?
He has made a proposal in the best interest, as he sees it, in ensuring that the peace process can go forward. And he believes he's right, or he would not have made that proposal.
Excuse me, General. I respect you very much. I cannot believe the President is not angry that he's being challenged. If I said to you, is he angry that the Democrats have challenged him? You say, of course. But what is it about Israel?
I'm not saying the President is pleased, but the President is not angry.
Enraged? How would you characterize it? It's a serious question.
He believes that the Israeli government should have acquiesced.
I mean, when a minister in Israel calls him a liar, when a minister of the cabinet calls him a liar and an anti-Semite, how does he react to that?
He does not. Well, I didn't know about that comment until...
well, Minister Ahrens has repudiated his colleague's statement, but how was the President feel about that?
And I think that is appropriate, and I think that the President, I haven't talked to him about it, will accept that repudiation as the views of the Israeli cabinet, which is what he should do.
General, moving on to aid in another part of the world, the Secretary of State has been in the Soviet Union. He's now intimating that he will offer U.S. aid without massive economic reform. Does that mean that that he will come back with such a request, and will you send that up to Congress?
Now, look, I think what is it? First, there are two kinds of aid. One is humanitarian aid to get the Soviets through the winter to whatever extent that's needed, and we have a mission over there under Deputy Secretary Crowder looking at what their needs are likely to be. The other is economic assistance in their reform program to market economy. Now, that, in order to be effective, any aid we give to that has to be into a reform program that ensures that that money will be usefully used to further the process of reform. Otherwise, it will just be wasted.
And to the Baltics, separate issue?
Baltics are a somewhat separate issue, yes.
The Cuban people are now in, I guess, their fourth decade of communist tyranny. This week, substantial aid has been, at least the withdrawal has been announced from the Soviet Union. Would the United States welcome an uprising against Castro now of the sort that we saw in Eastern Europe?
Well, what we would prefer is, I think, that the kind of resolution that by and large has taken place around the East, and that is that Castro understands time has passed him by.
But Castro's a very different kind of fellow.
Castro is a very different kind of
So do you expect a peaceful resolution in Cuba?
I don't know, and I think in part that may be up to Castro, but sooner or later, Castro ought to see the handwriting on the wall.
Now, General, there are reports in this town that President Bush may, as early as this week, say either publicly or privately to Saddam Hussein, deliver an ultimatum. Either he will now cooperate with the ceasefire agreements and the international efforts to monitor his activities, or coalition forces will be sent in once again into Iraq.
Sam, let me say, once again, Saddam Hussein is rejecting the will of the Security Council and refusing to let UN helicopters fly the investigating teams around, and we're looking at that very seriously.
Is it possible that if Saddam Hussein does not agree to do what he is supposed to do, we will send U.S. troops into Iraq?
We're looking at it, and we take it very seriously, and we think it is important that Iraq comply with the resolutions of the Security Council.
So it is possible.
It's a very important issue.
Thank you very much, General Scowcroft, for coming in today.
Thank you.
Next, our discussion here on a variety of things, and joining us will be PBS commentator Harding Carter.
Physically feeling the spacer.
This might be a turning point for the human race.
Blurring fantasy and reality. Watch Primetime Thursday. Well, we've had a week of hearings of Clarence Thomas to be on the Supreme Court, and we've learned what? That he doesn't really think natural law supersedes the Constitution, that he thinks there's a right of privacy in the Constitution, but he still won't tell us how he would vote on Roe, Wade, and abortion. So, George, what do you make of it?
I think he'll be confirmed. I think he should be confirmed. I think we've seen this week the lingering deleterious effects of the Bork fight. The Democrats complain he's not being forthright. Why doesn't he answer questions as honestly, candidly, and fully as Robert Bork did? The question answers itself.
Well, it's been interesting because he's certainly frustrated the Congress, no question about that, by not answering the questions. And beyond that, there's a sense that he has backed away from many of the things that he once did endorse, and that is also upsetting them because they don't quite know how to handle that. But as one member of the committee said to me, but there's a black hole there, but we're not seeing anything evil in it. So I think that what they're thinking is that they don't quite know what to make of it, but they don't make anything bad enough to deny him confirmation.
You know, this week has seemed to indicate to me that this may be one of the few people who the old adage may prove true about, that when he gets on the court, you will finally discover who he is because he'll be evolving on it. In
repudiating, then, isn't
well,
it?
yes, but I mean, mostly that's been baloney. I mean, they get on the court and they are what they were. In this case, a man who is as willing as he has been this week to repudiate virtually his entire past written record in one set of questions after another, and particularly the most provocative positions he's taken, seems to indicate a man who is willing to go pretty far in evolving see evolve so far in such a short time. As far as where he stands on the question you raised, you don't have any doubt, do you?
Well, I don't know. No,
Vote
George.
against Roe versus Wade.
Well, no, I don't know.
Which is precisely why he won't handle that one, as opposed to every other question he was asked.
Well, he wouldn't say how he would vote on the case. But George, what do you make of the fact that, if I'm correct, he testified that he had never in his life had a discussion about Roe Wade. Now, I mean,
what do you call
with no offense to bus drivers and the Ralph Cramdens of this world, everyone in this country, in their living room, in their bar, has had a discussion about whether they've known what the case meant or not, abortion. And for him to testify that, well, he's never discussed it, is not true.
But it defies belief, particularly when he does have opinions, and he talked about them, about the Griswold case that began the modern evolution of a privacy right.
Well, he's under oath, George. We had a discussion of oaths earlier. I mean, what does an oath mean?
Well, I mean, there are very...
Excuse me, does that fall within the number of the Bork problem, that you're not even going to speak up and say you have an opinion about an opinion?
Absolutely. No, the Judiciary Committee produced in 1987 a climate we're going to live with for a long time. We're going to get certain kind of nominees, and we're going to get certain kind of theater as we try to confirm them.
But there's one thing we have to say, though, beyond that, and that is that aside from his unwillingness to answer certain questions, his backing away, there's been another spirit in that hearing room all week, which has been the talk of Pinpoint Georgia and all of the, I mean, there's a lot of jokes now about the outhouses, but it's been beyond jokes. There have been some moments of tremendous goosebump-provoking moments there when Clarence Thomas has talked about his past and his family. And it's made a difference to people. When he talks about, I can stand in the shoes of all kinds of people that the rest of the justices don't have a clue about. That is affecting, and I think it is affecting a lot of people in the Senate, and it's also affecting a lot of people there in the room.
It's affecting people naturally, but politically, let me ask you, can white liberals really vote against this man, as they might vote against a white nominee who had testified just the same about his views on Roe Wade?
No, I mean, one of the things that's very clear is that they're in a difficult and embarrassing position when you have, a bunch of white guys sitting up behind a dais, many of them millionaires, asking a poor black man, a formerly poor black man, if he has enough sensitivity on the question of civil rights. They look ridiculous.
Oh, wait, they're not even willing to ask the hard questions on civil rights because they're terrified of precisely the areas in which you would think that the liberal left would be attacking. And let me just say, it is a really reprehensible thing that they were not willing to take him on the issues they say are important, by which I mean affirmative action.
Yeah.
I mean, and on this one, it is part of the general disarray, once more, that they are not willing to call the name of what they believe at critical moments. It's not a bunch of white guys sitting up there not able to do it. It's a bunch of politicians not able to encounter the
George, I'll give you the last word on this, and then let's move along.
No, it's just Juan Williams says in the Washington Post this morning, the dog that didn't bark in this week's hearing was affirmative action, which indicates, again, another collapse of confidence of the liberal community in their own agenda.
Except they went to the Senate floor during the hearings and had an affirmative action debate and approved affirmative action on the labor HHS appropriations bill. So they're willing to put their votes behind affirmative action when they're just talking about it.
Cokie. Okay, you move along now. Let's talk about another black man who wants a high office. Douglas Wilder, the governor of Virginia, has announced for the presidency. Jesse Jackson says he still doesn't know whether he's going to go or not. What kind of chance does Douglas Wilder have?
I'd say practically none. He's gotten himself in all kinds of trouble in the past year, and he seems to not be a very a person who can always say the right thing at the right time. But I think that he's going to make for sort of an interesting race, and he could easily keep Jesse Jackson out of it.
It's a no-lose proposition for Doug Wilder. The idea in any case that an unpopular governor in a one-term state can't run for president defies recent history in the Democratic Party itself. This is one in which Doug Wilder is going to do nothing to hurt himself. His polls are not that great right now in Virginia anyway. He becomes the alternative spokesman in a very real way in the Democratic Party for black voters.
Democrats have to decide if they want to try to win or if they just want to have fun. Harkin of Iowa can be fun. He's a sort of loose cannon and sprightly speaker.
I think you've just insulted him, George.
No. I mean, but I don't think he's a winner. I don't think he's going to topple George Bush. I don't think Doug Wilder is. If there's anything 2 years of history should have taught us in the last 2 years, it is that all kinds of things that are unthinkable one week are fact the next. And if we have a double-dip recession and a lot of other things happen, George Bush is beatable. Democrats have to decide if they want to run a candidate who can win.
Okay, Democrats don't get to decide. Candidates have to decide, however. And there's the question, if what you just described happened, there will be a late-blooming candidacy or two.
Well, here's the name. Cookie, let me ask you about a name.
Exactly. Here's the name on everyone's lips this week in this town. Every week we have a new name. Senator Bob Kerrey.
I think Bob Kerry's going to get in. I think Bill Clinton's going to get in. I think now you're going to have Dave McCurdy's talking about getting in. You've now got a whole bunch of people talking about getting into the race. It's getting energized. And the piece of good news for the Democrats here is that you do have some new faces, outsiders, young voices, that could start to get young people interested in the Democrats for the first time. They could start articulating some ideas that we haven't heard from Capitol Hill, certainly, and that could be good news for them.
Well, in the meantime, the guy I've been talking about, Governor Mario Cuomo of New York, still isn't in. He probably won't get in, but I'm telling you, I hate to plug another program here, but then I don't. I have an interview with him on prime time next Thursday night, in which he says what? Well, tune in next Thursday night, and you'll find out. But he's a very interesting guy, and I still won't absolutely rule it out. There. That time is up. Thank you very much, and I'll be back in just a moment. This week with David Brinkley. Thank you, and good day.